So, welcome to the podcast today. And I'm Brad Levitt. And of course, I'm very excited to bring on one of my really good friends, Nick Schiffer with NS Builder. So, welcome, Nick.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on today.
And he is a busy man. You guys know him from the Modern Craftsman and very highly downloaded podcast for our industry. Nick's been a huge ambassador. I think we share a lot of brand similarity in some of the things we use. And
I would say so, yeah.
it's funny because I think our story is kind of similar too. I did a lot of commercial, did construction management. You did the same. And then I guess entrepreneurship is kind of a weird story because some people just innately want to be. I think yours, as far as I know, that seems to be natural. But what made you start NS Builders? Like, where did that come from?
It's funny, the entrepreneurship I think came later after I started my company. I didn't really start NS Builders because I wanted to own a business. It was more that I wanted to just have control. And I guess that could probably tie out to the same thing, but it was more, when I started my business, it was a carpentry company, and I was doing small remodels. One of the first projects I got was a full home remodel, so not really a small one, but it was just me. It was I ended up hiring two helpers during that time, but it was primarily me, and I was doing all the carpentry and overseeing the subcontractors. I don't even know if I was making a markup, to be honest, like overseeing the contractors. I think it was just I was billing my time or what I thought my time was worth, and probably putting far too much time into it looking back. But it wasn't until I had met Mike, who's still with me now, that I realized that there's other guys in this industry that had the same outlook on things as I did and wanted the same things and were young and ambitious. And when I hired him, I it was like almost immediate that I realized that I could leave him on a job site and then go work on the business. And similar time to that is when I started really utilizing social media and growing the brand. And at that time, like after I started the company and was going through the carpentry thing, and once I started hiring people, I decided that I wanted to build this brand. And even if it was going to be this two-person company, I wanted a brand that everyone recognized. And that's when I started working with my brand company and developing the logo and what everything looked like and designing shirts and all of that. And I just started really promoting it and using social media to promote what I did as a carpenter. And it started to evolve, and it started to people were reaching out like, hey, I want to come work for you. I want to be part of this. Like, I love what you do, I love what you stand for. And that's when the entrepreneurship kind of kicked in, similar time to like the marketing and branding. you know got hooked onto Gary Vaynerchuk real early and just kind of paid attention to what he did. And throughout my career, I've always tried to take inspiration, especially from business outside of our industry, because I always felt our industry was behind in a lot of ways. So I'm watching this guy build a digital media company, and I'm like, how do I do that for construction? So I just started, kind of following his lead. Obviously getting into, we went to Snap. When Snapchat came around, everyone was doing Snapchat stories, and then Instagram was like, hey, we'll put stories on here if you come back, and trying to be in front of that and just utilizing that to our advantage. To fast forward to now, it's we're just under 20 people, and my role has really turned into um, more of the entrepreneur and really building the business and systemizing it. And for the better part of probably the last year and a half has been actually systemizing my company, where I don't necessarily like I have no desire to step away from the company. But I would like to be able to step away from some of the things, the day to day, and really focus on the stuff that I love.
So, what are I guess some, and I mean, teeing that up, Nick, there's so many things I want to go with this, from the marketing side and just the hiring and really the carpentry and how your businesses has evolved, right? But I guess now, what are some of the day to day things you're doing that you want to, I don't want to say pass on, but at least train and get those systems in place for your team to do?
Sure, I think it'd be easier to answer what I would like to be doing. And what I'd like to be doing is I'd like to have the flexibility of being on site for more than say an hour, working with the guys, problem solving, kind of being creative, coming up with solutions. That's what I'm good at. And it's probably largely due to the fact that, I'm the owner, right? So me making a decision really quickly doesn't necessarily, like, there's no one going to tell me that I'm wrong. Where my guys may, not necessarily trip up on it, but may second guess themselves. And, that's, part of training and getting those guys to feel comfortable to make decisions. And, the longer they're with me, the better that becomes. Um, but as far as what I don't enjoy, I actually really don't I don't enjoy estimating. It's just, and it's a huge part, and I don't think a lot of I don't think a lot of people do enjoy it, to be frank. But it's something that right now all of the pre-construction is on me. I'm marketing, I'm selling, I'm meeting with clients, I'm vetting them, I'm pricing, and and I'm doing all of that. And more recently, I'm getting my project managers involved earlier because we just did employer reviews before the end of the year, and every single person said we need to spend more time planning before we jump on a job site. And I mean that every single, like, on our, I do a little questionnaire, and it's like, hey, how do I make your job easier? And everyone filled out the same thing. And so it's something that we're implementing now. It's like, all right, I want you guys to be involved more during the pricing side of it, because I'm sitting here, I'm pricing, and you know, to the fault of being a carpenter first, I think I look at a lot of these projects as, all right, I could frame that in a day, where it's like, yeah, if I think back, I probably could have framed it in a day, and it probably would have taken me 14 hours and I wouldn't have cared. But now you got to equate that to two guys doing that for a day at 14 hours, because whatever, they have, they're not having the opportunity to think this stuff through like I am right now. So that's going to slow them down. And now, and you're paying for every hour, you're not just working, quote unquote, a day, whether, no matter how long it is. So involving my team with the pricing side of it, lends itself to be more accurate and obviously more aggressive with pricing, and setting ourselves up for success.
Well, I think what's interesting, the planning side, at least I've seen, where we've tried to get more streamlined, especially on the front end side, pricing, vetting, getting decisions made. A month on the front end can cost you 5 months on the back end. I mean, seriously, if you don't have a lot of stuff decided, you're not planning and estimating, and there's scope gaps, and it creates some major cost for us. And I guess my question is for you then, because I think our roles are very similar. Like, I spend a lot of time in business development and marketing, social media, and working on with the architects and designers, those cultivating those relationships, but then seeing the construction from, when we sign a letter of intent, if you will, and that's, all the way until it's submitted for permit and we hand that off.
Mm-hmm.
Are you actually sending it out for bid yourself, like to some of your vendors? Because I mean, some of you are going to self-perform, but is someone being sent out, or are you just doing high level budgets for the client?
It's multi-step. So I'm gonna do, if I guess, to walk through the process quickly, I'm gonna do a gut check. So if someone says, "Hey," if they come to me with a design, most of our clients don't come to us with design. So, which is nice. We get them on a pre-construction immediately. We introduce them to architects, and we work collaboratively through that. And even at that point, we're going to get to a point where we have floor plans and elevations, and we're going to look at some square foot numbers based on the level of expectation. Hey, this is a $600 square foot project. Are we within the range that we're trying to achieve? But once we get into tracking costs, yeah, oftentimes, right now I'm doing a lot of that. I'm sending stuff out. When I do pass it off to my project managers or my assistant project managers, where it's like, hey, this is going to be your job, you're in charge of pricing it, the structure is way better. They're running it through a bid process. We're using Builder-Trend. Putting together, yeah, they're putting together bid packages. It's the right way to do it. But the other side of it, it's like sometimes I feel as though overwhelming them, or we're not at a point where I know who's going to run the job. So I'm gonna be way more informal. I'm gonna call my site guy and be like, "This is what I'm dealing with. My number is accurate," and I track a lot of it. So you know, oftentimes I can, you know, I can call someone and they're like, yeah, you just carry $1,200 a day for this, that, and the other thing. And I can look at that. All right, that's going to take 5 days to excavate. You know, this much. I can put together some high level numbers to get the customer to a comfort level. And once we're there, then we start refining. Um, but it's dangerous because if I get him in a comfort level and I miss something at my high level, you know, and that happens more times than I probably, you know, would like to think it does. And, you know, that's where it makes me realize that it needs to be way more thorough, and I need to utilize the others, you know, everyone else's skill, not just, not mine, which, you know, when it comes to estimating, I wouldn't say I'm very skillful at.
Well, that check and balance is hard because I think the example you give, Nick, I mean, I had the same thing. I had a home, we built it, so we knew the cost. I had a client that wanted not a mirror image, but they wanted something similar. And this was probably 2018. So at least for us in Phoenix, this was at the market where 2018 things started to come up steep, like fast. Concrete was rising, the labor and material, masonry, site work, framing. I mean, not to what lumber is today, right, with COVID, but it was really when things were peaking. And I remember talking to the client. I'm like, yeah, if I take, $25 a square foot added on just for incidentals, like we should be fine. And the pricing came back and it wasn't even close. And I really took that high level. I didn't spend a lot of time setting that budget. And now I have a client that's like super upset because we
Yeah.
completely missed. And it was things on, it's really easy for me to look at something, and I'm sure you too, at a finished level, and I can say, yeah, with that tile, with that countertop, that cabinetry, I have a good pulse of what that's going to cost. But when you're doing a hillside, there are so many variables, and it was like I was 50% of concrete, 50% excavation. So these were big misses,
Right.
right?
It's tough. I mean, you know, we talk about this on a recent episode of the Modern Craftsman. It's like we Tyler actually makes a good reference. It's like you go to the doctors, right? And you know, you're sick. They're gonna run some tests. You're gonna get a bill that day, and that might not help. They're like, hey, we're gonna run some more tests. They're gonna charge you for that too. It's like, you know, as builders, it's like we're expected to know more than like a doctor. It's like you're expected to catch everything. You're supposed to go into this understanding everything. And I speak a lot towards remodel, where it's like you rip the walls open, stuff changes, and people are mad at you that your framing numbers off. It's like I yeah, I get, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but even new construction, it's like, yeah, there's a lot less unknowns, but there's still the level. I mean, I think it was I forget the gentleman's name, the Zen builder, but you're building a prototype. Like every single one of these, it can be a mirror image, it can be the same exact house, Brad, but it's like every single house, they're not going to be the same. Nothing's going to be the same, and there's still, you're dealing with, 100 plus human beings, building this thing, and they have wives and kids, and like that impacts the job, and you can't, there's no way it doesn't impact the job. He's behind because he got sick, he couldn't come into work. There's so many variables in construction, and I feel as though that's oftentimes uh, forgotten about, and we're held at this this level of, you should know exactly what stuff costs. I mean, yeah, 50% a big miss, but there's probably, like, you didn't go into that thinking that you were, like, you didn't go into that thinking that you were just blowing a number, and thinking it would stick. You had reason to believe that.
And I'd say in defense too, when you have the grading and drainage or civil department of the municipality come in and say you need scour walls, you have to add, 100 foot
Right.
slurry, trench, because you can't have the hillside come in, which was, never in play. But I mean, there are those variables too. I think what's interesting is, the analogy as well as the doctor. I think that's a great one. Or like, I'm sure you get customers say, Nick, what's your square foot price? How much does it cost to build a house? And it's
Every
like, I
day.
don't know. How much is a bag of groceries? Like,
Right.
what do you put in the groceries? I don't, they're
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is that bag full of steak, or is it full of cereal? It's true, and the square foot number is always so funny. and I'll answer it. And I'm like, you know what? Like, what are you talking? They're like, well, we're looking to build a custom house, and I'm like, you're probably $500 to $700 a square foot. That's where I'd start. And some people are like, "Eh, well, I mean, I was hoping to be, 200, and I can say right there, it's like, I know we're not going to be able to build something for $200 a square foot. Just not the way we're set up. Well, I was hoping to be, 400, 450. All right, we could probably build that. I'm trying to gauge you. You're trying to gauge me. I'm not going to come in and tell you I can build something for 350, and then you come back and you have this design that calls for 750. Yeah, 550, whatever it is, right? So it's always just so interesting, and but people want that quick number. So it's like you go into it and you try to give them the I think Steve Basic said it, like, what's the number that scares you? It's like, if you can get if you, let's figure that number out first. And because if we can figure out the number that scares you, then we know what your real budget is.
I love that, and I think that's a good way to vet them. And I think I've heard Steve say that. I know Sean Van Dyke says that too. I think they share that same
Yeah.
philosophy. From your side, Nick, what's interesting is you're very ambitious. Like, I've seen you grow NS Builders. I've seen you grow system wise. I'm trying to understand. Like, did you always have vision? Like, okay, even though you have commercial background, you get into carpentry, and now you're morphing your company into remodels and now custom homes. Like, was that vision always in play, or is it just something that drives you because that's more of a personality trait that you're uber competitive and you want to see and as builders grow?
I'm definitely competitive, in a lot of ways, but I always wanted to build homes. That was always my goal and my dream, and I I don't really know why I didn't focus on that. I think it was easier to get carpentry and remodeling jobs. And obviously, if you do a remodeling job and you advertise a remodeling job, you're gonna get a remodeling job. And then it's like you get into this reoccurring thing. It's like, how do I break into new construction if my whole portfolio is remodel? And that's what I've been really navigating hard this past year. Is like, all right, I want to break into it, and I don't really know why, because the people that I've talked to about it, it's like, you make good money remodeling. You've done some crazy. You could be the niche remodeler that does stuff for $1,100 a square foot, and it's like, yeah, it's not, but it's just not what I want to do. Like, I don't want to be confined by the existing building all of the time. There's something about building something from scratch, and that's always been my goal. And I think it goes back to the brand awareness, right? I love when people see something and be like, "Oh, yeah, that's an NS Builder's house." You can tell, and that's really, I think, what has driven me to grow the business into something larger. Um, and obviously, just like from a personality side too, it's I I'm competitive, and I want big things. I want to live in a house that I'm proud of. I want to build a house for my family that portrays who NS Builders is, and continue to utilize that and become this builder that is known for a very particular product. It's like, if you want that, you need to hire Nick.
So when you say product, though, are you looking more like aesthetic or style, or more like level of, I'll just call it like a luxury brand? Because it can vary, right? I mean, I know you're pretty versatile in the work that you do anyways.
I would love. It's tough, and I battle with this, and it changes. A big part of me would love to stick to a specific aesthetic, and that would be modern, contemporary, yeah, like West Coast hillside homes, Australian architecture. I'm enamored by that stuff, and it's what I gravitate towards. um but on the flip side, I do appreciate traditional, and we have a project that we're kind of unfolding right now that's going to be more of a traditional shingle style New England home. We're actually doing another one that's going to be more, New England traditional as well. And I love that. I love that style as well. And I don't want to necessarily pigeonhole myself, um, especially in this market where everyone tells me that modern just doesn't have a place here, which I disagree with. I think that the product there's not enough of it around for people to understand that it's available. And that's like a whole nother like path in my mind.
It's a
Path in
mentality
my
thing
mind.
because I mean we can dive into that because what's interesting is you see, look, the ultra modern contemporary that we're speaking of, maybe some you see in Norway or Sweden too, some of these European countries, but there is a tendency where people say, well, as a spec home, you're not going to do it because you're going to cut off a lot of the demographic or families or whatever. Um,
This is where I like this is so I'll just tell you my thought on this, right? Um, I don't know if I agree with that. And I've talked to a couple different guys. Like we had this really big client a couple months ago that we were trying to find a lot for. Long story short, she found another lot. Unfortunately, it came with a builder. Couldn't negotiate the builder out of it, and it was. I looked it up, and it was a modern house. So I called the architect, and I'm like, "What's up? Like, you know, how'd you how did you sell this modern spec?" He's like, "Dude, we did a couple designs, and the thing sold in 5 days because there's nothing else like it on the market." But for me, the other part of what, I want to get this business to is I'd love to do one quote unquote spec a year. And, there's been a few that I've went down the path of, figuring out like, hey, this is the lot, this, kind of unfolding what it would look like. And I'm going to sound absolutely crazy right now, but we had one recently that it was like, it would have been an $8 million sell for a spec, which just is like insane, like huge, hugely leveraging everything, huge risk, but everything checked out. It would have worked if we could have got the lot. It would have worked and it would have sold. And I think in today's world with computer technology, rendering software, there's so many projects that I'm seeing that are being pre-sold based on the fact that you're through a rendering. They can see it. It's like, hey, this is what we can build. Are you cool with this? And people fall in love with it because they're it's hard to decipher what's real and what's not. So I'm still going down that path. I'm still exploring it, and I truly believe that we'll get to a point where we will do one in the next 1 to 2 years. Um, but I think the market exists. I just don't think, especially talking to some of these other guys that have sold them on spec, they're like, it's the fastest thing that sells for us.
and here in our market, the most expensive home that's sold to date, that is a hillside, like ultra modern, like ultra
Right.
modern, and it just top dollar.
Right. Right. And it's hard because I think, you hear the word luxury and you hear the word modern thrown around wildly. And it's oftentimes attributing to something that is neither of those things. And adding the word like ultra to modern, I think is important because people oftentimes try to portray something as modern when it's just not. Modern is more than regulate baseboard or no baseboard or a monostringer staircase. It's more than that. It's the use of light, floor to ceiling glass and what that glass looks like, and the, it's I call them moments. There has to be moments in the home. And it has to be an experience, and that you know large pane glass and just use of materials, you know there it has to be really well thought out, and it has to be done all the way to the end, because if you do 75% of it, it's not it. You've lost it. You didn't go all the way to the finish line, and now the product looks as though it's not done. It's close, but it's more. You put square baseboard instead of a plaster detail. It's like because you didn't want to pay for the reglet. It's like it's silly things like that, and I feel as though that gets tossed around just too casually, and it's just wrong.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I've seen that. I've seen, and that's the problem with some people with specs is that they'll cut back or maybe they get timid. They're tentative in that approach. But going back, I guess, to your not only philosophy as a builder, but Nick, I think how, going back to the beginning, when you're here as a carpenter, you're superintendent in the field, you're wearing all these hats. Um, when does that opportunity come to hire? I mean, you talked about Mike, right? That you brought on first.
Hmm.
So how did you know it was time to hire? And then when do you start bringing on additional? I think that's the biggest thing new companies are trying to figure out is when's the right time to hire? And then how do I support the payroll?
It's hard. I don't know if I have the answer to that. I hired Mike because I needed a carpenter. I needed more carpentry. Two of my friends worked for me. One of them was training to be a firefighter, and he was going to go, eventually be a firefighter full time. And another friend of mine, I pulled him away from, an excavation company he was working for because he wanted to start his own company. And I was like, hey, I'll help support. I'll keep you busy. You come work for me as you start your own company. Um, and it was like I was the carpenter with these two guys that they they I mean they were great. They were super helpful, but they weren't carpenters. That's not what their passion was. So it got to a point where I knew I needed a carpenter to replace me, so I could then start building the business, start selling more work, planning for the next job, not invoice clients at 11 o'clock at night. It just that's where I realized that I needed to hire someone and to support when it comes down to supporting payroll, it really it really depends on how you're set up, but if you're set up time and material cost plus, it's a little bit easier because you bill it right to the job. But say your fixed costs and you got a carpenter on staff, you hire a carpenter midway, you have to figure out how to offset the hours that you accounted for and put him in that role and set those expectations. Like, hey, listen, I figured I'd be here for 2 weeks. That was me doing it. Obviously, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer, but I need you to step up, or hey, I'm going to, step up and either take it from me, or if they're in a position where it might be a job or two jobs that you have to work alongside him, and it's an investment. And it's an investment in the sense that you're probably going to lose money on the carpentry aspect, one, two, three jobs because you're working side by side. But the effort is to train them to eventually take that over so you can focus on other things. I think the more important hire was is hiring the stuff that I'm not good at. For the first, gosh, 4 years, 5 years, probably 5 years, I did my bookkeeping. And when I say I did it, like maybe twice a year, I go through and like clean stuff up, and then I'd pay,
Using
then I'd pay.
QuickBooks or what? I mean,
Yeah, using QuickBooks, but and then I'd pay my tax accountant a couple grand to go through and clean all my mess up every single year. And finally, I was like, this is insane. Like I'm why am I doing this? This isn't what, bro. It's insane. Like, and yeah, I mean, it was a mess. But you know what? I look back and I wonder, I question, well, why didn't I just hire a bookkeeper? The reason I didn't hire the bookkeeper is because I didn't know how to. I know how to hire a carpenter because I know what they have to be good at. It's like, oh yeah, you're a good carpenter. It's like how the hell am I supposed to find out what a bookkeeper is supposed to be good at? How do I test them? And I hired someone that didn't have bookkeeping experience that wanted to get into that role, and she was great, but she didn't have the experience, and I paid for it when I had to let her go, and there were mistakes in there, and it was because I didn't train her, because she didn't have the experience, and I didn't take the time to train her what needed to be done. So she was set up from failure because of me, and it was only I think I was probably frustrated and not being able to deal with the accounting, and I came across a random, I'm sure you get them, the LinkedIn, like, hey, nice to connect, we should do some networking. And for whatever reason, one of them stuck out, and she offered accounting for construction services. And I'm pretty sure I'd have to go back and look, but I think I wrote back, yep, all right, I'll bite, what's up, like, you got me. I'm vulnerable. Um, and we've been working together for a little over a year now. And man, outsource, yeah, Yeah, so everything like from the QuickBooks side is outsourced, and it's a team. So basically, a project manager on accounting that handles everything in QuickBooks. Got a QC manager who goes through and makes sure everything is crystal clean. Closes the books every 30 days, which is super. Like to be able to go in and see the books cleaned at the end of every month is just huge. Um, Process manager that basically documents the process in which we do things. So it's like at the end of the day, I have this SOP, like, hey, this is how you pull the bank feed. This is how you write an invoice. Um, but it was an incredibly painful 12 months of just working multiple times a week with her to go through the process in which I wanted things done, and cleaning up what I had made a mess of. To a point now, I can look back and be like, man, we've made so much progress, and why didn't I do this sooner? So your question about like how to know when to hire, I think that would be a huge piece of advice. Is that if you're not going to spend the time to keep the books clean and updated, you gotta find someone to do that. It,
But and I understand that, but I think with your side, Nick, is super complex. What I'm trying to understand is so she's not part of NS Builders. You know, you're outsourcing your financials. So is she doing monthly financials for NS Builders? Is she doing all your AP
yes.
and AR? She's doing you, as you mentioned. We talked about financials, but what about all the payroll for self-performing, all the payroll for
Yeah.
salary?
Yep.
And then what about like the benefit side? Do you have a third party doing benefits or like healthcare or PTO timesheets? I mean, how are you managing all that?
All right. So it's a multi-step process for AR, AP, payroll, everything. So um, let's talk about like payables. So a bill comes in, goes to I have an admin, so she basically takes that and gets it to the PM to get approved. The PM codes it, tells it what job it's for, what cost code it's for, is it approved, accurate? Yes, it is. Then it gets dumped into Build a Trend, hits our
Real quick, so the invoice comes in from the sub, and that is being QC'd by your project manager, not by you, and they're gonna code it, approve it, make sure it's within budget, within contract, progress
that's correct.
payment. You know that they're good to
Yep.
go.
So yep, and once it's good to go, the admin inputs it into the budget per the notes of the PM. So it hits the budget in Build a Trend. Build a Trend talks to QuickBooks, kicks it over to QuickBooks saying, "Hey, this has to be paid." At which point, once a week, I get a report saying, "Hey, these are the vendors that requested payments this week." So this is
And you're
so
doing
this
check pay once a week, like check runs,
yeah,
typically same
exactly.
as me. Okay.
Yep. Get everything. If I have questions, I'll reach out to the PM like, hey, did that guy really finish that today? Like, or is he billing before he should be? If I'm good with it, I go through and we have a system that um, my accountant and the financial team works through Asana. So Asana is like a project management software, like similar to like Monday or Slack, I think, but really, it really robust. So I'll get a list in there, and each one of those vendors will be listed out. And if I'm good with it, I just click it off, say yes, approved. And once those are approved, they go over to um, the um, the girl that runs the checks, and that goes into we run all our checks through bill.com, and everyone gets most of them are set up for e-payment. So we tell our vendors, hey, set up for e-payment, you get the check or the deposit in your account in 3 days. Otherwise you get a check and it's 7. So and that gets released. So AR, same no. Yeah. I mean, we no, and we let all the vendors know. It's like, hey, we don't I don't physically have checks. So if you want to get paid, you gotta sign up for this. And it's not. I mean, they're not signing up for anything. They're just kind of okaying the fact that, I mean, they don't have to sign up for anything. They'll just get a check in the mail, or if they want to sign up, yeah, direct deposit. But they're not showing up to my job with at asking for a physical check. So it's QC'd through the PM as well as me. So the accounting team that who I outsource, they're really just you know, facilitating all of that and making sure the communication happens. Um, and on every Monday, and that includes, uh, credit card payments. So every Monday, I get a report showing every receipt that wasn't entered. Meaning, if someone went and got gas on Sunday, I'll get it will show up on that report Monday morning saying, hey, you know, my yeah, yep, yeah. So I mean, it's so anything. I feel like I'm dumping a lot of information here. Um, the anything from an overhead standpoint. So if it's not everything I was just talking about was job related, right? If it's overhead, if it's someone went and bought tools or went and got fuel or their van serviced or I got a car wash, whatever it is, that receipt I can upload. Um, I just take a picture of it and it gets uploaded to what we call HubDoc. So it's similar to like Receipt Bank, things like that. So it's immediate. I pull up, I get fuel, I get the receipt, I open my phone up, I take a picture of it, it goes into HubDoc, and I'm done. And what happens on the back end is that the financial team gets that, and then they're matching it up to the Amex transaction in QuickBooks and puts that attachment there. So we have a full audit log with all the attachments. And if something shows up on the Amex, or we pay something, and it doesn't have, it's like someone didn't process the invoice through the for the job, or they didn't process invoice through HubDoc. That's when I get that report on Monday saying, hey, you have 23 transactions, and here are the people that, here's the like whose card it is. So I get a list like Nick, my PM, or Mike, and then I can reach out to everyone like, hey, you gotta submit these today. And it's usually like within like the last 3 days. And he's like, man, come on, like I just need a minute. I'm getting the guys going. I'll submit it in a minute. But that's the process. So we're not missing, like, rarely are we missing a receipt.
Which is good. So, so do you have in addition to that expense reports they're doing, or is it strictly they're using the company card for like all their purchases?
I can't stand expense reports. So everything goes on the company card. And if and my accountant's good, it's if she sees anything out of the norm, it goes. I get notified.
And then the
You know,
accountability side, though, I understand out of the norm, but to make sure someone's not going excessive at Home Depot, maybe on Ramboard, or things where they're mismanaging the job. I mean, how in depth do you get accountability wise with them, or are most of
I
them
would
good
say
stewards?
most of them are good stewards. It's funny. I'm sitting here thinking about a gentleman that no longer works for us. That after we let him go, I was going through his credit card statement. He'd buy Mountain Dew all the time. I was like, what the hell are you doing? It's just it's so funny to me. Like, especially that it's Mountain Dew. But no, I think when it comes to mismanaging a job, I think that gets caught when we're over budget on site protection. Like, you're using the RAM board, for example. If we had $2,000 in there for site protection and we're at 2,500, I might open up and look at these receipts for that are attributed to the job. It's like, dude, why did you buy 12 rolls of RAM board for this job? Or, hey, you got a receipt in here that you bought a folding table. Well, I needed a desk. Well, that's not job cost. Like, that's not necessarily a job cost. Um, so I would say we're really thorough. Um, and from the overhead side, anything like fuel, like for instance, one of my guys got fuel out of state. And the weekend before, two of them fueled up on like Saturday, and she pinged me. She's like, "Hey, guys are filling up today. No one's working." I'm like, "We're good. Like, no problem. Like, they probably just took the van out to get fuel, so they didn't have to do it Monday morning. Not a big deal." But she's on top of it. Yeah, which is great. And it's when things, and looking at 2020, we put together a relatively formal budget based on fictitious numbers, like what I thought I'd spend on things. And now this year, 2021, we've built a budget based on last year. So we're looking at, all right, last year you spent $100,000 in professional fees. Let's look at that. All right, and we broke that out, and I can expand that within our report and see where that $100,000 was spent, and say, yeah, I'll probably spend that again this year. Or, you know what? I went to that conference and that was a $10,000 conference. I'm not going to go to one this year, so maybe we can budget 90. And that's really new for me.
Well, I
That's
think
really
what you're
new
hitting
for
on,
me.
Nick, if I interrupt, I mean the job costing, and that's one of my next questions because I don't think, as far as my experience has been, I think everyone else in every industry job costs. They know exactly every little thing that's going in the production line, and a lot of it's a different, manufacturing or things. They're tracking that. In construction, we're kind of open ended,
Mm-hmm.
and it really wasn't until I would say probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that I sat down, and my system's a little bit different. I have a controller that's in house with me,
Mm-hmm.
that we can talk about later, but it's very similar in the sense that she's like, well, Brad, this is how much you're spending on legal fees, right? This is how much you're spending on marketing, on dumpsters, on Ramboard, on photography, or as you mentioned, travel,
Mm-hmm.
for business. And so the advantage is you can create a budget. Now I know, okay, well, what's my nut to crack? What do I have to bill this month to make sure that I can keep overhead for my superintendents and PMs and office staff
Right.
and all the incidentals, right? Because what I like that you're doing is if someone goes and buys a folding table, yeah, that may be necessary and it's fine. It's not like there's an issue with that, but it's don't bill it to the job, bill it to overhead so we can track and figure out, our cost.
And that's, I mean, the it's crazy as I scale up. That nut to crack, as you say, and like understanding what's that. It grows super fast, and and you almost forget, not forget, but you almost don't realize unless you have that put together what you really have to do. Meaning, like you're like understanding if you don't execute a certain amount of work, your percentage on that, your markup has to be, you have to collect. It's not even the percent. You could be charging 50% markup, but if it's not enough dollar value to cover that, month to month overhead, it doesn't matter what your markup is. And I think, from the lack of business experience prior to owning a business, that was one of the hardest things where it's like, yeah, we're expensive. Our fees are big. And then it's like, why, if our fees so big, why can't I afford to why does every month hurt so bad? And it's then, and looking at it now, and it's similar. It's funny. I'm glad you said it was like a year and a half ago for you, because I feel like, I was like, oh man, I thought Brad had his stuff together. Maybe we're both in the same boat.
Yeah, we're in the same. I wish I could sit here and act like it's this perfect thing, but it's the same thing where
Ah, yeah.
I worked for a builder. I had 5, 6 years, and I feel like, not to throw them under the bus, but they would just take a job they're bidding. Oh yeah, we'll just do it this percentage,
Right.
and have no clue at the end of the day. And so I would follow that same mindset. I'm like, why are we not making money? Why are we losing here?
Right.
Why? And until you mentioned, and you're really tracking this stuff, and now I know. Okay, well, it's not even markup, margin. Yeah, that's important, but it's what's my nut to crack, and what are
Right.
my costs, my incidentals, my unknowns that are happening, and why am I not
Right.
tracking that?
And it's, and I said off air, but last year was a really bad year for us. It was really tough on us, emotionally, physically, financially. Everything just was really tough. And, we were incredibly busy, a ton of work coming in, but nothing that we could get to fast enough. And, we're durations, yeah, exactly. And it was our overhead costs never changed, but the rate in which we were completing work did. So, yeah, we were still making the same percentage, but we did less work. So at the end of the day, it's like, damn, like that took longer, and now we weren't collecting enough money, or fast. We weren't collecting money fast enough to cover what we were spending a month on overhead. And it's this year, and with my accounting team, I started working with a coach right at the beginning of COVID. Both of those things, these people are holding me accountable, but more importantly, they're making me understand what it means, and and what the dollars mean, and it not being so much about the markup and margin. That's wildly important. Like that's how you make money. But it's how does that relate to how many sales you have? You can be more aggressive with your markup if you have more sales. If you're if you or bigger sales, right? So being able to, my coach, we have a fantastic KPI worksheet we work out of, and it's it's overwhelming to be honest. But as we work through it and I begin to understand it, it becomes this incredibly useful tool where it's allowed me to have the confidence to say yes and no to projects with and know what that meant, rather than like I'm just going to say no because I don't think I need it, where it's like no, I'm saying no because I know that that's not going to help what our goal is. If we're set out to do you know x amount this year, that's not going to have a big enough impact to that sales, and we need to hit that sales number if we're going to spend you know 9% of that on the overhead. And being able to just like again, being able to track that and being able to see that is super helpful in the decision making, especially when it comes to what sales you want to be doing, and even more so, like to go back to getting into more full home builds or large scale renovations. It's you know I look at that. It's like, well, what's your goal? And my goal is to do $2 to $4 million size projects. I'd love to do a couple $8 million projects, but right now I think it's more realistic to get in the $2 to $4 million. And ideally, we have $12 million worth of sales, completed in this year, and that means I would need three $4 million jobs or six $2 million jobs, and that's a big difference. And but being able to plug these in and look at that sheet and see what that does, and realize that I don't actually need to sell six. Like if I sold just 3 4 million, maybe that's what I go after.
And I
So it,
love, and I think you're teaching something that's the most important when you start thinking about, just to use some numbers, if my nut to crack as a company is 50 grand a month for payroll, for incidentals, for overhead, I mean, just to run my business, and you multiply that over a year, 600 grand. Well, I have to do according revenue, right? And then where that delta can change for a builder, for anyone, as you mentioned, is okay, am I doing 10 remodel jobs at 200,000, right? For $2 million and then $600,000 fee, or am I doing, one $2 million custom, or, but not that you
right,
get $600,000 fee, but your theory is correct in the sense that if I can do three, $4 million homes, well, the margins are there. I know my nut to crack. I know my warranty exposure now. I know as this thing goes down the road, I can base that fee instead of just someone saying, "Hey, Nick, will you come build my house? I'll pay you a fixed fee of 200 grand." And you're thinking, "Oh, that's a lot of money," until you realize it probably doesn't go very far, right? Over a 16-month
right.
process.
I think to even to simplify it even more, it what it comes down to is that when you understand what it takes to run your business and then equate that to what you need to do in sales dollar value, and then divide that by how many projects you want to be doing or how many you can, right? Like if you have one PM, it's probably not realistic for them to run 10 projects, 10 $200,000 projects, where it's like, but he could run one $2 million project, or maybe two, and being able to understand all that allows you to not take that job when, you know, I feel like so many builders, including myself, are so optimistic where it's like someone's going to call you. It's like, hey, I want to build a $12,000, 12,000 square foot custom, but I want to start in 6 months. And you're super excited. So we're probably saying, yeah, absolutely. Let's go. Where it's like, wait a second, hold on, hold on. It's like we've already built this year out. Like if we do that, we're gonna need to hire someone. Or if you do that, now you're impacting other things. Or the other side where it's like, hey, can you squeeze in a $500,000 renovation? Yeah, I should be able to do that. And not you're making these decisions based on feel rather than and I just want to get something off the table. Like I'm certainly not a professional at this. This is something I'm learning each and every day. This is something that I've put a lot of effort into, and I'm just now recently realizing how important it is in my decision making, which I think has led to the ability to like this year we're going into 2021 with 4 new construction projects, which is fantastic, and they're all custom. They're, most of them, I'm sorry, two of them, we brought the architect. Another one was an architect driven. And then the third one is an architect's personal home. And it's because we were able to shift our business and make sure we were focusing on the projects that we wanted rather than taking on projects to keep the pipeline full.
And I think the point you bring up, Nick, that's super valuable is you have to understand as a business owner that yes, just because the job may come, and what's tough in construction, I mean, you and I, even though we're fairly young, we've lived through enough recessions where you don't want to turn away work. But at the same time, it's really important to understand that, yeah, not everything is so cut and dry. If I'm going to sign $3-4 million customs, I may have to hire somebody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I might have to hire another coordinator. I may have to hire another estimator. Well, that's going to change my overhead. I have to add someone in the field. And depending on the complexity, they may not be able to run two houses. They may only be able to do one because it's so complex. And so that's going to change. And then you have to keep feeding the machine, right? And I think a lot of people miss that in our industry for whatever reason. I think I did, being transparent, right? You don't until you start really understand the numbers.
I mean, let's look at the opposite way. A couple months ago, we were invited to bid on this project, biggest project I've ever bid on, and and we don't oftentimes bid, but it was for a great architect, an amazing project, and I think our price came back at like 7.2 billion, and they ended up hiring the guy that was 10.2. And because they had a better portfolio, they've built these type of projects, rightfully so. Hey, I just was excited to be part of that process. But I thought of that, and John had asked me the question on the Modern Craftsman, and he's like, if that hit, would you have been able to do it? And of course, I'm saying yeah. Like this is my shot. I got to take the risk, and this is how I take my business to that level. But to think now, it's like if I did $7.2 million job based on what I was projecting for sales, that would have been my entire year of sales. But at the time, I had three project managers. Am I putting all three project managers on that? It's like no. So it's like it works in the opposite as well. It's like if you take on one job, now all your eggs are in one basket. You can't do that.
Yeah, and that's what you have to understand the growth in comparison to the skill level and talent of your team, to the training, to the systems. I mean, and I think what's incredibly complex, and I'll be honest, I have a hard time getting my mind around this, Nick, how you do this, because I've been asked a lot to self-perform. Like, do you want to do self-perform even though I worked as a subcontractor all teenage years, and before getting into GC? Um, and I really don't. I think it's very complex, like our company and what we do and the projects we do, and trying to start a framing division or a carpentry division or a tile division. Yeah, because the ebbs and flow of my projects, and I'm thinking, well, now I got to start bidding and manage people and hourly, and you're doing that. Like you have salary people, you have them hourly people that are self-performing, and you're bidding, I assume, for other GCs, right, for your carpentry side. I mean, how are you managing all that cash
No,
flow and time?
my carpentry is not
It's
being bid
just
out to other
self-performed.
GCs. They only work for us.
So how do you manage, I guess, your job flow where you may have a
It's
crunch in the summer, three jobs, and then you have a slow time in the fall? I mean, how do you even?
it's super complex. And it's funny you're touching on a sensitive subject right now for me because you know I think just about everyone that I've talked to for business advice has told me that the self performing is what will kill me, and I appreciate that. I would be lying if I had said that I have never considered getting rid of it, but there's a big part of me that really enjoys it, and I think there's a part of it that's a selling feature. Now, what it comes down to, and this is basically where my mind has been at for a couple weeks now, is that we're not going to be able to self-perform all of the carpentry. Just never going to. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to scale the carpentry side of my business up that much because keeping the guys that are self-performing busy can be a struggle already. I mean, we have a cabinet shop. So if I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, and there's been times when the cabinet shop has been slow, and that's scary, you know? And it's, what it comes down to is really outlining, I guess, scaling, like looking back, it's we need to have big enough projects that can sustain those people, but not be the primary. Like, I don't think that we're never going to frame a house. I just don't ever see that happening. We're not gonna we're not gonna do the trim in a 10,000 square foot house, but we're gonna have carpenters on staff that they're probably gonna help with the trim. They're gonna get on site and help with the frame, and then they're gonna be the carpenters that are on that project throughout. So as we need carpentry, we have carpenter on staff that is just they're there. They're the project carpenters, and it's a little easier with the small projects we have now, where it's like we can kind of bounce them around. Hey, go frame this addition. Hey, go frame this remodel. And then once the plasterers get over there, head over there and do the trim on this one. But it's a moving target. You're always moving them around. We're meeting once a week to figure out where guys are going to make sure that everyone has a place. But you run the risk of putting them on a job that burn hours. And I don't, you know, I don't want to do that. And oftentimes I won't, or I'll put them on a job, but then I'll eat the cost of it because I can't bill the client for that. The emotional side of what we do, um, where it's like maybe some will say, well, that's they hired you to have that level of care, sell that, and you can bill that. But I don't know. I don't have the self-performing thing is very difficult, and it proves to be difficult. Um, you know, parts of me think about separating them as different companies, for a multitude of reasons. Um, I mean, if we want to go down a rabbit hole, it's like if I separated my carpentry company, I could bill NS Builders the carpentry a higher carpentry rate, and I could make a profit on both. And that's how these big companies they do it. They have a dump truck, right, with their name on the side of it, but underneath it says leased by this trucking company. And it's not even their truck. It's the other company's truck. So the other company is leasing it to the construction company, which it's the same company, but it's a way that they're able to make additional revenue, which it's smart. But I mean, again, getting more complex, getting into larger systems and things like that. The self-performing thing, to answer your question, is extremely difficult. It's something that I don't think will go away within my business entirely. I do think it will be because our projects are getting larger, and our projects have relatively been anything from small remodel up to $2-3 million. And if we're getting into the million to let's like $1 to $5 million range, then I think there's an opportunity where the carpenters can basically have a place where they can be a group that bounce from each job, and be the support to what we need. Um,
Well,
um,
and I'm not trying to talk you out of it. Hopefully, you know that by this conversation. It's just more curiosity than anything because I think about, the material side, inventory, right? And as you mentioned, our roles and jobs are incredibly complex, and adding an element now where, for me, if I have an overlap in a project with the superintendent who's on salary, yeah, well, there's overhead, I can move that. But when you have someone hourly, you're constantly thinking every week where they're going to be, what job are they billing to, and depreciation of equipment or, office space or however you're doing that, from a financial strategic
right.
standpoint. But it just adds a whole nother element or a management side where you have to have someone managing these guys, make sure they're performing, make sure they're showing up, right? Just like we have to do with our trade partners, that they're not
Right.
distracted, they're on the job and they're doing what they need to do.
Yeah, it's tough, and you know I have the financial team actually tracks all of the hours. So we do time clocks through Build a Trend, and if they're not putting their time to a job, we basically have this general line item where they bill their time to. So each at the end of the month, I get this report showing, hey, you spent 200 hours on general, which means that's 200 hours that weren't like we couldn't bill. And it's in relation, it's usually a very small percentage to the amount of hours worked. But it's like, all right, well, that 200 hours equates to a dollar value. And if that keeps adding up and we're spending, say, $100,000 a year, that would be like me hiring a carpentry, an estimator or a carpentry company to come and, screw around at my office and fix stuff. It's like that's a lot of money. That's basically what it is, right? It's busy work. So it is something that I have to, continue to monitor, and I have to improve upon. I mean, Brad, to continue the transparency, last year I looked at I did a report a couple weeks ago. We did $150,000 worth of rework last year, meaning work that I got on site and wasn't happy with, or the guys screwed something up, or strictly self perform, and that's a huge nut. That's a big dollar value. Oh yeah, oh yeah, and it's just rework, and it's you know maybe we could have let some of that stuff fly, but that's just not who I am. That's not who we are, and that's where it makes me question, where it's like, man, does it really make sense to have everyone on staff? Like, does this, what would have happened if it was a subcontractor? Would the subcontractor have billed me for additional time? Probably, but but all of it, or would a good portion of it have been, a quality thing where it's like, hey, you understand our quality, you need to rip that out and do it again. And when a subcontractor's on the hook, there is this financial aspect to it, where an employee, you know, there there is no financial repercussion there. It's it sucks, and they don't feel good about ripping it out, and I have learned to navigate that conversation in a way where I'm not, hey, you suck, like you got to do that again. I'm trying to you know help them improve, right? Hey, I'm giving you this opportunity to like rethink the way you did that, and let's do that again. And but they're still getting they get paid again. They're getting paid to rip it out, and they're getting paid to put it back in. And it's a matter of catching things, early enough, where oftentimes I feel as though, you know, especially with newer guys, it's something gets done and they're probably like, that's I guess that's good enough, and then it gets installed, and then it gets plastered, and then I show up on site and I see it, and I'm like, that access panel is an eighth inch too small. It's like, oh yeah, but it's not. I'm like, rip it out, and they're like, what? And it's like $700 access panel. You know, it's going to be buried behind a sofa, but it just doesn't fly. Like, that's just, we've set out to be really, really good. And we're only going to get really, really good is if we hold ourselves accountable every single time. Not allow the mediocrity to slip in here and there, because it will just continue to slip.
That philosophy, I think that, I mean, it shows a lot about you as a person, Nick, and just the brand you're building. I mean, I think that's what makes NS Builders who you are. I just, I think about it from my side. Even we do a hybrid. We do cost plus. We do lump sum. It's both. It's really, our market's kind of all over, and it really depends on the price point too. Really on the really high end, real expensive homes that we're doing, they typically are cost plus for a lot of reasons. They're incredibly complex. There's, as much as we try to have decisions, are open ended. But at the end of the day, even on a cost plus, there are legitimate things that I can't charge the customer for, right? And I know that going in. Like, even though my fee's locked, whether it was neglect on our side or mismanagement, or we didn't manage the schedule properly and things were installed before they should have been, and you have to rip stuff out to put it back in. I look at that too. I'm tracking that. I'm tracking, well, what are my costs associated with these things that we're not properly managing? What is the warranty? As I've come back, even though our trades have warranties and we do, and we follow that, and, there's going to be things we do that are extras and courtesies, and warranties pass, we're going to cover it. So there's always those costs, right? As your tail gets longer. And then, as you mentioned, that element of, like I have right now, we have a ceiling that just was not turning out. Like, it was part framers, part drywall, part painter, and we end up redoing the ceiling 4 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So frustrating. And then everyone's like, well, the drywall wants to get paid, the painter wants to get paid, the framer doesn't want to get back charged. And it's hard to point blame, and you got to eat some of these costs now. And then some of the cabinetry got damaged because 4 times we have drywallers in there and painters. And so these costs add up. And, It's really hard to track that. I think that's one of my biggest struggles is how do we accumulate enough revenue to have a kiddie fund, if you will, to take care of some of the stuff. So it's not costing the job and our bottom line at the end of the day. And then, I mean, it's just when you share that example of it doesn't meet my quality, and then we also are maybe buying some new base and case and restaining it and putting it in. It's just it's a whole nother level.
Sucks. It's and it's tough too because I'm like I said early on, I'm pretty good with just making a decision on the fly. And you know, there's been a few times where I see something, I know it's wrong. I think I'm going to let it go. I go home, I don't sleep, and then I show up on the job site the next morning and they're like, "Oh, we're ripping that out." Okay. That's why you're here, right? And it's tough, and I've made some. I mean, dude, I've made some big, big decisions. As far as like to redo things or to rip something out, and everything from subcontractor work. But what it comes down to is oftentimes it's a conversation amongst me and the team, and it's like, hey, can we be proud of this? And there's a story I told a few times, as though we had this small kitchen project, wanted to figure out how to expand our bandwidth, and said, why don't we partner with another cabinet maker, so when we have smaller projects, we can maybe utilize them. And we hired them to build this kitchen, all the cabinetry. We installed it. It didn't seem like it was going to hit our mark, but I was like, let's just try to get it there. And there were some serious issues with it that probably could have been fixed. And, it got to the point where Ken, who runs my cabinet shop, and myself were standing in the room, and we had spent all day just like trying to adjust things and make it look right. And we still had this list of things that, if the guy could fix them to a level that we were happy with. And I looked at him and I said, "Do you think that there's anything we can do with what we have here that we could walk away and say that we're proud of?" And he said, "No." I said, "Then we're ripping them out." And I called the client and I said, "Hey, I'm not giving you an option. We're ripping the cabinets out. Let me know when you're going away for a week, and we're going to come in here and do a swap in 7 days." And we did. And it cost, I think it was like 60 or 70 grand to do it, between getting all the trades back, the counter guys, tile, cabinetry cost, I mean, hard costs, like no profit. And I mean, it was a small job, $170,000 budget, and or it was just, I think it was, yeah, it was like around 170. I didn't make any money on that job. I lost money, like significant money, but it was the right thing to do. And,
Well, hold on,
and
and if I interrupt you, Nick, for a second here, what I think that people miss from this story is it's easy to look at the balance sheet and say, or this job specific, this job cost, and say I lost money. But what people don't understand is that, okay, getting back to the branding, this is an investment in your company and yourself, right? By you investing that 70 grand in this project, what that does is now enable you to build your company and build to that next one, which you and I have continued to do. When I first started out and I could only get a kitchen remodel or do a bathroom vanity, I already knew that I had the experience and I knew that I had the aptitude and that I wanted to do the $2 million custom. And then I knew I wanted the $5 million one, the $10 million one, right? Like, you and I are aspiring to this. But if you're not going to take care of the client at the $170,000 level and execute at the NS Builders investment that you know you're going to be, you're not going to be able to get that $5 million job. And that's why, I mean, I'll commend you for that, because that shows why there's very few builders, I think, that would take that initiative and have that drive. But that's going to allow you now that it's, like I always say, chase experience, not money. You're chasing that experience, that investment in yourself and your team, and teaching them, so that now in the years to come, when you're doing 15 million a year and then 25 million a year, that brand's been built and that expectation's been set.
yeah, and there's this, I continue to tell that story. And the reality is, if we had left it, and I think this is an important note, if we had left it, we probably could have got it to a point where the client was happy. 100%. Like, the client would have been like, it would have been to a point where the client was happy. Would we have gotten a referral out of it? Maybe not. But the client would have been happy. It would have been fine. Everything would have went on, and we would have moved on, and we wouldn't have spent that money. And you know, but I also didn't do it thinking that, well, I need that referral. And if we had we I guess what I'm getting at is, if we had left it and made it the best it could have been and finished the job, it probably would have been a pretty neutral situation. Because I don't know about you, but I hear plenty of horror stories from reputable guys where it doesn't make it very far. Like, they have a terrible experience, but they're not chanting off their front step telling everyone that builder stinks. Like, it kind of, the builder goes on and does another job, and someone else has a bad experience. It's not really shared the way a poor restaurant experience might be. you know. But the flip side is, us replacing it. Yeah, the architect called me and said, "Hey, I've never, like, no one would have ever done that. Like, they would have just made it the best they could and moved on." And the client was super happy, and their neighbors were, couldn't believe that we did that. But it, I think it's still, I'm not, it didn't end up being a referral. Like, it's still a neutral situation. So the end result, you know, understandably, would have been the same, for business. But for us, and for the accountability for me and my guys and my team and our approach as NS builders, that's what would have suffered. The fact that we would have let something slide, and then why wouldn't we let it slide the next time?
And I understand that the company value, the company mantra, I mean, everything you stand by would have suffered. Did it change the client experience? Did it change their final
Oh
outlook?
yeah, no, they couldn't believe that we were going to do it. They, were, I think there was a point in time where they were like, no, 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 that's not necessary. And I said, listen, with all due respect, I'm not giving you an option. I'm not happy with it. I'm replacing it. And and we even went as far to make some upgrades in the cabinetry, because we were like, you know what, we're saying sorry, and we're saying sorry again, and this is how we're going to do it. And the experience was great, and they were ecstatic. With the kitchen, and it was a lesson. And I mean, even more recently, we built a really expensive kitchen, and we built the oven cabinetry based on the Thermador spec. I hope Thermador is not a sponsor for you, uh, because the specs they weren't wrong, but they were poor, in the sense that you had these ugly reveals. I'm talking, a couple $100,000 worth of cabinetry, and you have these two ovens that don't fit as though they were fit, like they were built for that. And we built it to the spec, and it's like, is that wrong? Was what we did wrong? I mean, maybe you could argue that we built it to spec, but the client has every right to argue that I didn't hire you to build me a spec kitchen. I hired you to build me a bespoke kitchen, and I gave you the appliances. So it's one of those things where he was right, and I said, you know what, we're gonna take these out, and we're gonna rebuild them. And and we learned from that. It's if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have felt the pain. And now, by doing it, rebuilding them, and feeling the pain, next time the appliances are going to be in our shop, being fit before the thing gets sent out to finish, because that hurts a lot less to be able to fix it while it's being fabricated than it does when everything's done, installed, caulked in place, counters are in, et cetera, and then you're building a cabinet over.
Funny you say that, because we just went through the same experience. I mean, we used I don't want to say a lesser brand, just it was one off where we used
Mm-hmm.
some different appliances that I typically do not use, and the reveals are wrong. Like the panels didn't fit right. They're stuck out. They protruded from the cabinetry face. And it's the same thing. It's like I'm sitting there in the client, you already know where this is going to go, as you said. I mean, you can't, this is spirit of law, letter of law, like I can't leave it, even though we built it to spec and that's what
Right.
they said. It just, you have to rip it out. My cabinet company wasn't happy about it, but,
No.
and of course we end up eating that cost, but I mean, it has to be done.
Right. It's It is. It's we're putting ourselves in this bracket of um, bespoke, custom, ultra luxury, ultra refined, and we're going above and beyond. And when you're operating at such a high level, it's so much easier to spot mistakes. And it's almost like we're doing ourselves a disservice. Another example would be we're working with this plastering company on a project, really, really modern, contemporary home, and the plasterer was, you know, multiple times the amount of money as our traditional plaster, and months of time longer. Like just everything was longer, but I've never seen a wall so flat because they're using 8 foot straight edges and screeding these walls to be within a 30-second across these massive planes. Now, what happens there is it looks incredible, but that little nick in the wall that ended up in the paint, that's the only thing you see because there's nothing else to draw your eye away from it. And that's what I mean by, when you start operating at a level of, you know, not perfection because nothing we do is perfect, but striving for excellence, you easily trip over the things that don't meet that. It's like a piece of white, a white countertop, pure white countertop. There's one speck of dirt on it. The only thing you're looking at is that dirt, you know? And it's tough and it's funny. I say it all the time. It's like it would just be way easier to be mediocre. I'd make way more money. I'd have way less stress. If I just came in here and just slam stuff together and tell them I don't care and I'm on to the next one, I'd make more money. I don't know if that's true, but I like to think that, yeah, I like to think that it would be true. I'd probably lose my shirt, but it is. It's just when you're pushing yourself to be so good or strive for that level, it's so the level of expectation that clients have um, is almost to a point where it's unrealistic.
So when you were, and I'm going to change this a little bit back to marketing because you continue to touch on this. I mean, I would assume when you were in college, Nick, you didn't take marketing. I didn't. I see the value of marketing now, whether logo design or messaging, photography. I mean, whatever it is that you're using to build your brand. And I know that you've spoken about this before is when you're marketing your company, you have to be very careful because, as you said, you may be showing this amazing kitchen remodel or bathroom remodel. Well, the problem is you can have 20 clients call you about a bathroom remodel and you may not want to keep doing that bathroom remodel. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but you're looking at the vision of your company and overhead of, as we discussed. So there has to be some care in your marketing strategy to say, okay, I understand the scope of work that I've completed. It's not fake it till you make it, but it's like I need to position my firm to be here because that's where we're going. And I think you've done that really well. I mean, speak to that. Like, is this just from watching, as you mentioned, other industries market their brand? Is this self-taught? Is this something that you just pick up on, or you just inherently know, I know where Ennis is going to be, we're growing, and this is how I need to position us?
It's paying attention to what other people are doing in different industries and being self-taught. I've always said that I have an obsessive personality, and I do in the sense that when I see something that might work or that might benefit me, I'm all in. And it's if someone tells me, hey, the right way to get your brand to certain clients is Facebook ads. You got to target Facebook ads. You know what I'm doing that night? Learning how to target. Yeah, learning how to run targeted Facebook ads, and but it's interesting to me. It's like it's an interest. The sales process is interesting to me, and it's like this game, right? And and I don't mean that in a bad way or a sleazy way. It's like no, but they're if a client wants to buy from you, it's your job to walk them through the quote unquote sales funnel and get them to trust you and eventually buy from you. The building industry is a little different because the funnel is so wide, catches so many people, and it's a really long journey from the time that they come across you to the time that they actually want to build with you. So you have to be patient. So I've I've learned that through, paying attention to other builders, but paying attention to other industries and what they've done to, um, drive sales to their company from a marketing standpoint. Because it really is. Someone said this, and I forget who it was, but it's not sales and marketing; it's marketing and sales. Because the marketing is basically brand awareness. You're building this brand, you're sharing this brand, you're attracting people to this brand, and in hopes that they eventually make their way into the funnel and buy from you eventually, at some point, or at the very least that they're sharing. You become the recommended guy. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna build a house, dude. You gotta check out Brad. Brad, like, he's the only guy in this area. Like, you should see his stuff. So that's where I realized that, all right, if I'm going to do this, I need to create a brand, and I'm going to leverage that brand to its potential. And all of the social channels, Instagram has obviously been a huge success for us. The video has been successful for us. It's really just choosing to be the loudest person, right? It's you if I'm not going to share how we do something, someone else is. And if that someone else is happens to be the guy down the street, well, guess who they're calling? Later on is that guy, because he's the one that decides to share his process, decides to share his story, the reason he does things, his why in the business. I'm too quiet. I'm too quiet. I'm not, and he's overshadowing me, and I'm not going to have that opportunity to be, in front of that client. So it is. It's self-taught, but it's by paying attention and investing the time uh, it takes to get the clients that I want.
Well, I think what you've done a good job. I'll come in there. Is there's the saying that personal branding is permanent job security, right? And so there's a level there of Nick as an individual brand. There's a level there of NS Builders as a brand, the company that you own and you believe in. The two do coincide, right? Because there's a lot of relationships you have inside and outside the industry. Do you have clients that, not on a romantic level, but they fall in love with Nick, right? The personality, the video, the energy that you bring, the knowledge. But the reality is you can't be in the job running every project, in the field running every project. You have to hand this off to your team. So do you have an issue there where clients come in, they want Nick, but now they have Mike or they have whoever out in the field running their job?
I would say not as much now. And I think I can attribute that to a couple things. Number one, I don't ever remove myself entirely from the project. I'm still part of, I do my very best to be part of every weekly meeting. Um, I bring a lot to the table, oftentimes uh, additional work. Or yeah, I usually am pretty quiet, and then at the end I'm like, hey, do you guys mind if I offer up an opinion? And thank Yeah, exactly. And thankfully the architects are all like, they've learned to know me now, and it's like, all right, Nick's got something good. I want to hear this. Um, but beyond that, I think it's my personal brand. Yes, it has been a focus from the branding and the NS Builder side, but I'm also spidering that out in, where Ken runs the millwork shop. We just launched a new series on YouTube called Revealed, and that's his. I'm not in it. I'm not running it. He's an extension of NS Builders. So people get to learn about him. And, when I'm on Mike's job, I'm showcasing Mike. Mike gets the credit in the projects. Same thing with Nick, the other Nick. I'm showcasing him, and it's about the people. I think oftentimes people make it too much about just that one person, where it's like, if I can expand this and show you that this is a team effort, people fall in love with all of us. and it becomes more about us as a team, as an approach, rather than I want Nick here every day. And I think that is something that people have a hard time with, especially when they go from like a one person, one or two people to building a business and not just being self-employed, right? Is that they're like, well, my clients hire me for me. They have to realize that you're still you're still that person. You're still the guy. You're still who they're hiring, and it's your job to get them to be comfortable with the fact that by hiring you, they're hiring you and your team, and you're hiring the process in which this gets done, not me swinging a hammer. Because if that's what my client wants, I'm going to be very upfront. I build a lousier cabinet than Ken does. I'm not as good as a carpenter as some of my guys. Just I might tell them I am, but I'm not, and that's why I've chosen the role of being a business, you know, owner and building the business and putting these people into place because I want to work with some of the very best.
Well, to be a good CEO, you said this early in the conversation, right? You're going to hire people that are better than you. I mean, the only way to be an effective business owner, an effective company, is you have to have a team of people with so many strengths that outnumber your weaknesses, right? That are much better than you, and that's what's going to put you in a good position. And Nick, I know you're incredibly busy, and you've been so generous, giving us an hour and a half of your time, with some big news on the way too that we won't give away, but personal news, I guess we should say. But on a side note, so what 2020 with COVID and a lot of projects were affected. I mean, what are you excited about? What's upcoming for this year in 2021?
Super excited to get into these bigger projects, these custom builds. I was, as many of us do, shaking. I think, as John says, shaking the trees of these architects that I wanted to work with. You know, hitting them up at their office. They take me out to lunch. We love each other. We can't wait to work with each other. And then the date ends, and it's like, but we have all these reputable builders that we've been working with for 20 years, so it's going to be hard to slip you in. So, with respect to that, I actually landed a project that we're going to be building this year and called them and said, hey, I got a project for you that I want to bring you on. And I think it was actually you and I talked about it, and you were like, if you can do it, do it. And oh, yeah, I mean, they've sent me 2 jobs since, and so I'm super excited about that. It's an amazing, amazing house. The clients are amazing. Um, Same thing with this another new build. Great clients. Super excited. These are both forever homes. They're building them, forever. It's their family home. They want to do this right. And I brought the architect on that one as well. And a third build that we're early on in discussion, but it's came across this architect, very very contemporary, modern. Um, just hit him up on Instagram one day, and he was like, "I actually have a project that's right in around like they're out of New York, right around you. Would you be interested in looking at it?" And I said, "Yes, send it my way." And we've been talking for months and just getting to know each other. And it sounds like we're going to be building another custom forever house for another client in the next couple of months. So, 2020 was a brutal year for us. I'm thankful to have continued to work. I'm not so thankful for the stress and the gray hair that it has given me. But I really do feel as though I utilized that time to learn and then to improve. And I spent some good money with some great professionals that have helped me bring my business to a level that um, will be more sustainable and in a better position and scalable.
Which is huge. I mean, that's everything. And, I commend you for that, Nick. And just a word of caution, as you already know, doing those ultra modern or modern designs are pretty tough. Like executing the high level, they can be a little costly when there's things that loan up. There's not much forgiveness, with those. With
Brad, I will be like, that is honestly what I live for. It is, and it's like, I love dealing with alignment and light and shadows and materiality, and how much even like how materials touch. For whatever reason, I'm really in this big mindset of dissimilar materials really shouldn't touch. And if they touch, that needs to be this like very purposeful connection. And I've been trying to approach this a lot more in the way things are done. Like, I guess, for example, slamming cabinet. I don't want to say slamming because it's not. It sounds negative, but cabinetry with a tight scribe pushed up against the wall. There's nothing wrong with it. That's like the norm around here, and that's what we've always done. But it's you know, well, can we revisit that? Does it have to have a filler? Like, can we have this intentional shadow gap? Or can we have this intentional moment where it goes from cabinetry to wall without this, you know, unnecessary filler? Or stone that goes up against, drywall, and you get this like caulk joint that fails. It's like, well, does it need to be against the wall? Could it be left off the wall? And I'm using poor examples, but it's it's things like that that make me question, you know, and really strive to improve upon. Um, and my guys probably like, I know Ken drives him crazy. He's like, dude, oh my, like he's like, just let it go. And I'm like, I can't. Like there's these things that they mean it's intentional, and that's our word. It's being intentional with everything that we do. Um, so a word of caution is heard, uh, but I'm definitely excited for it.
Well, let me tell you this. I mean, I think you use the word intentional, but I think your word is moment. I love to use that with, these moments in the house and these moments in the details and
Yeah.
the finishes and stuff. And so that theory philosophy is amazing, Nick. And again, can't thank you enough. So where can our listeners find you?
Well, we got a podcast, the Modern Craftsman podcast, as many of you guys know. But on Instagram at nsbuilders, or our website nsbuilders.com.
Well, you're the best, Nick. Thanks so much.
Brad, thank you.